Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. The topic is about how we use digital marketing to drive acquisition growth for financial institutions, and in a particular case study that we are going to present about private markets. I think it's a very unique approach how we acquire essentially leads for wealth management, asset manager, private investors. It's really finding high net worth individuals through social media, through Google Ads, and make them investors for your business. But first, a quick intro about who we are and what we usually do. Lize, if you wouldn't mind skipping moving to the next slide, thanks. So we're a performance marketing agency that really specializes in user acquisition or customer acquisition for, I think e-commerce is a big pillar we do, but it's also lead generation for mainly finance companies. And what is very different to your classical digital marketing agency is that we really put our remuneration scheme at risk based on if we achieve your KPIs or not. So I think for you guys in the webinar now, as you are in financial markets, you're very used to work already performance-based. And I think our approach is to bring that into the advertising world. So in easy words and simplified, it's if we underperform, we get underpaid. And if we strongly overperform, we get paid well. And next to being a marketing agency, we're also an investor in small startups. So we really understand the nitty-gritty of also putting capital into something and building a company. We have more than 10 investments, from e-commerce to gaming to service companies. And what we also do very well, and which is unique and very important for financial markets or lead generation for financial markets, it's a data-driven approach, because the process is much more complex than process is much more complex than e-commerce, for example, because the decision cycle from having a first touch point with one lead to actually make someone invest $50, $100, $200,000 is a whole different story than buying a consumer good. And along the process, it's really important to measure all data points and get somewhat of an aggregated view and ideally send that data back to platforms or just working away with the data to achieve the business targets. And I think we're usually very, very, very good in that. So what is performance marketing? I guess I have actually said most of it. Essentially, it's advertising to acquire users, leads, investors, clients for specific businesses, and doing that with a very performance-driven approach. So remuneration is directly correlated to success, to business KPIs, and it's never about impressions and branding and so on. So all these things we try to skip away and really focus on achieving business goals and business value. And so now I'm going to hand over to Lize, because she's a senior performance marketer at R17 and also team lead, and is in charge of most of our financial clients and lead generation. And I think the case study where we go in depth is with Petiole Asset Management, where we had quite a big success. And Lize, so I mean, what was the scope of the business case? And yeah, maybe you can run us through that slide now.
Okay, cool. So we started with this client kind of end of December of last year, beginning of Jan. And our goals were really to just acquire leads, high quality leads for them, which their call centers or relationship managers on their end would then call these leads and obviously start the process of trying to acquire them as investors. So on our end, we had to kind of drive high value investors. So they had a minimum investment amount of 50,000 francs through various platforms and channels, which I'll go into now next. So we kind of followed a full funnel methodology. So awareness, consideration, conversion, retention. And we used Google Ads, LinkedIn ads, and Meta ads. So our reasoning for this, in my opinion, Google is kind of the highest intent platform, just kind of general knowledge. LinkedIn ads is then second, and then Meta ads is third. But our goal was really to kind of see which platform worked the best, what strategy on that platform worked the best. So we used kind of our in-house creative, we used targeting on these platforms. We did top of funnel, so kind of acquisition stage, and then middle of funnel, which is kind of reminding the customer of who we are. So we kind of started on each platform with that kind of structured approach, and then saw the results from that, and then built upon that, just based on what we got. As you can see on the right here is an example of one of the creatives that our graphic design team created. We focus very much on problem solution. So what is the customer facing? What's their issue? How does our brand or our product, essentially, in this case, it was private markets and investments, how does that solve that problem, essentially? So here's another example of what we created just from a visual standpoint. You can see that the hook, essentially 30% of wealthy individuals are invested in private markets. So it then directly speaks to the type of customer that we're trying to acquire, which is a wealthy customer, essentially. And then throughout the next 2 images, we provide a solution, essentially, for that customer. Okay.
I think that's a very good example. So what we often see in I would say classical digital marketing agencies is that the visual approach of how they try to get leads is much more conservative. It's much more, just having a brand message. Private markets, whatever, could be potentially interesting. And I think in digital, and if you really do performance advertising, that's far not enough. And even if you probably you guys that are now listening, even for you, it's probably not enough, right? Because you need to actually know why this product is better, and why you should actually actively consider it to put in your data and speak to a relationship manager. And I think we have, and Lisa, especially, you have built that bridge very nice to be still very brand compliant and visually appealing, but still also coming to a point why someone should become an investor, in that case of Petiole Asset Management, and really actively consider that. And that is done through, I think, very on the spot hooks, like 30% of wealthy investors or private outperforms public over the past, 30 years, if you compare S&P 500 or whatever metrics you consider.
I think that is also quite the difference between, let's say, a performance-driven approach and a more traditional agency approach is, so a lot of times agencies will kind of say they're brand building, right? So they say, this is what we do, and that's all. So our goal is obviously to drive a certain conversion or action. So our thing is always then we need to say why. So why should you care? We kind of say what we do within that, but it's mostly why should the customer buy into what we do? And how is it relevant to them? So it's something that we really focus on, just to essentially drive the performance aspect of it.
Yeah, that's very, very well phrased.
And I think we took a 2-step approach, kind of on the top level, just of educating the customer. So we wanted to convince prospective investors why private equity is important, first of all, because a lot of people actually don't realize that private markets can be accessible. They kind of see it as something that, you have to be a billionaire for, a millionaire for, essentially. But that's not the case. And that's what we had to educate customers on for Petiole specifically. And then the second point was we had to convince prospective investors why Petiole is the right vehicle for their portfolio. So the first one is why the product. Second one is why us. And so I think, as we discussed just now, is the hook is super important when you look at performance marketing and just, on paid media in general. So we did a lot of testing. You can't just throw something and hope it sticks. You really have to kind of flesh out what is important for the customer, what's problem solution, come up with a bunch of different kind of hooks that you can use, and then test and see which one works the best. And in that way, you can then improve your marketing and your lead generation exponentially over just, putting an ad out and hoping for the best. Yeah. So some of our tactics to drive performance were, we used a reach frequency strategy. So it basically changed on a daily basis which ad and messaging a lead is served based on their kind of nurturing status. The second one was data exchange between CRM and ad platforms. Obviously, feedback is super important. So to feed the algorithms, they need to know what's working, what's not. And so kind of our setup allowed for that really in a really effective way. You essentially share data back to the ad platform. The algorithm can then learn better, find your type of customer much more effectively and at a much lower cost per lead. And then the third one was once a week, we did kind of new tests and messaging to help further identify what resonates with prospective investors. As I said earlier, it's kind of the learning aspect of it so that we can improve and drive performance instead of just hoping for the best.
Yeah, I would like to emphasize on two of the points. The point number one, reach frequency. I guess, Lize, one thing we realized down the line was the decision cycle from a lead to becoming an investor is much longer than what we've expected, and it's actually normal because you don't, first of all, you don't make an investment decision in weeks, and usually also people don't have the urgency to do so, or wealthy people usually don't have. So being constantly top of mind through the decision cycle became very important, and I think that was one of the big success drivers that you take. And the second one on data exchange, obviously fully GDPR compliant along the way. It's with the big CRM system, Salesforce, HubSpot, and so on, and Google and Facebook and LinkedIn. But what in a business sense, it's a big difference if you have an investor investing 50,000 or 1 million, and that difference we somehow need to send back to the platforms that this particular lead is much more interesting than a 50,000 investor, obviously like on that grade, but also a lead that never becomes an investor. So that whole pre-qualification process is very important to send the signals to machine learning and to the algorithms as quick back as you can to say, okay, we don't want actually these type of leads, we want these type of leads. And I guess that's kind of the business sense behind it.
Yeah, totally. And so obviously, I think one of the biggest things with performance marketing and just what we did with PayTel was we really wanted to drive data-driven decision making. So it's about testing, learning, figuring out what works. And so we kind of did this in 3 ways. So we simulated results using advanced technology and data insights to forecast performance. We did this on a daily basis. We kind of compared the different simulations in order to maximize our outputs and what we were able to achieve. And then we used advanced data tracking solutions to enable us to merge first-party data with the ad platforms on a lead level, as we just discussed now. So the learning aspect is so important. So if you can't track and you can't measure your data, then you don't know how to improve or what to change. So that was one of our most important pillars, essentially, with PayTel Asset Management.
Yeah, true. And I think you always had to bring the two worlds together. Platform data, so what is actually Facebook and Google and LinkedIn telling you, and what is actually in the CRM, and kind of merge or marry these two sides and make somewhat of a conclusion on it.
Exactly. Okay, so from our learnings, generally, after a couple of months of, as we said, testing, especially hook testing, message testing, creative testing. One of the other ones that was super important was audiences, especially with this type of product, figuring out your audiences, because they're obviously higher net worth individuals. It's super important to target your ads at the right people as well. And so our findings from this was that LinkedIn is really great for nurturing. Meta is good for retargeting. LinkedIn and Google are good for acquisition. And so kind of now that we found the winning strategy in terms of our creatives, messaging on the creatives, our targeting, so which audiences do we target to, where it works on, which platform it works on. Once we kind of found that formula, it's really nice because you can figure out, is the cost per lead low on this platform? Also, does this platform and the specific targeting and the messaging we're using, does that create quality leads, or does that get us quality leads? And once you have that formula, you can scale and build and acquire a lot more leads at a lot cheaper costs, essentially. Yeah.
Sure. Have you been surprised that Meta was actually working pretty well? Because I mean, it's not your usual platform where you find high net worth individuals. Or I mean, I think that's just actually the stereotype.
Yeah, I was super surprised because even when I mentioned earlier kind of the hierarchy of the platforms and just our understanding of how paid media works, you know, Google is super high intent, LinkedIn is then second, and then Meta is kind of the lowest usually in terms of just intent for investors, especially. So I was quite surprised, and especially at the low CPL that you could acquire these high quality leads. I think it was the lowest CPL that we had across all platforms. So it was very interesting. And obviously, once you find the right audience that you need to target, it was quite cool because you could play around with the messaging in quite a responsive way. So yeah, I was quite surprised. And I think it's a really nice learning because most of the time you'll rule that out in your mind before you actually start. But for example, you can carry it through to all finance clients, essentially knowing, okay, Meta is actually a promising platform that you can use, and kind of change the misconception about it, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Fully agree. I think it's probably going to, I mean, also for you guys that listen now, if you review your channel selection or where you invest money, I'm very sure it's often ruled out. But if you actually also ask yourselves if you might be, let's say, part of this target group, high net worth individuals, very often you're also on Instagram and on Facebook. And I mean, if you consider, let's say, Switzerland as a core market now, I think you have 5.5 million users on Facebook and Instagram, which is pretty much everyone except kids. So also high net worth individuals are there. It's really tricky. It's tricky to find them. You need a proper targeting, but the people are there. I think that's a big learning for us also, that Meta is not only for your classical consumer goods, but also for more advanced products.
I think it's because we had this idea that older individuals, because most of the time people who invest this amount of money are going to be older, are mostly consuming, you know, kind of news outlets or LinkedIn, but they're actually consuming a lot more modern type of media than you would expect. So even if you look at a platform like TikTok, the older generations are starting to go onto it. I wouldn't say that it's great yet for acquiring leads for, you know, high net worth investors, but it just the general trend that we're going in is that older people are also consuming media on these channels as well. So it's worthwhile to advertise there.
Yeah, true. I mean, Lize, it's also what you learn across the way, that the thing called user-generated content, which is essentially these native iPhone videos, also perform very well for older target groups, 60 plus or so, because I think people are used to consume that type of content because they also go to the TikToks and Instagrams.
Totally. I mean, we have some clients that obviously they have this idea that older generations don't respond or don't understand that type of content, but we've seen time and time again that it actually does work. And so it's our job to steer clients in the right direction with content decisions, because they obviously, we have to keep within their brand values and imagery and everything, but we know what works on the platform, and so then we're able to increase performance a lot better than a traditional agency would, for example. So that's one of our key advantages as well.
Agree. I've just received the message that we're almost out of time for guys. 10 minutes left. I see. So, yeah.
So our results of the PTL kind of case study was that we were able to increase monthly leads by 300 to 400% and 27% decrease in cost per lead. So we were only able to do this because of the testing approach and the learning and the data feeding back in. So all those kind of methods that we spoke about earlier, it was very systematically implemented so that we could achieve these targets and reach these goals. So I don't know if you want to read the testimonial from the client, but it was great working with him.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, indeed. No, I think we can move to the next slide. It's also, I think, published in the PDF case study that you will receive afterwards.
I'll hand back to you.
All right. So I think usually if you guys now are interested, I mean, we have obviously we'll have displayed the email, and we can also do live chats at the later stage. But the pricing, if we usually do that type of thing, we have three pillars of service that we do. The one is performance marketing. The second one is content creation, and then another very important one is lead pre-qualification. Performance marketing is pretty clear. Together with content creation is pretty much we run all your paid assets, we create paid media, we do the content, and we try to achieve and hit your business goals. And then lead pre-qualification is we have a partner, a call center company that we use often to pre-qualify the leads, because that's a very important thing to have. You know, if a lead signs up on LinkedIn, it's very important to have as quick as possible a call to that lead and somewhat pre-qualify. You know, in that particular case, we have obviously a lot of FINMA, financial market regulations, so in Switzerland, to really understand, is this person a qualified investor? And then there's a couple of standard questions that we can figure out, okay, is this person a qualified investor? And this is also a service that we offer to really be able to understand end-to-end customer acquisition, because again, performance marketing, we define ourselves, we want to bring you clients, and obviously if we can help along the way, it makes total sense. Yeah, and I think now we're actually already done. Yeah, I would say thanks a lot, guys. I'm actually surprised how many people are here. Thanks a lot for joining, and I'm excited that you will connect, and I wish you all a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Lize, for bye.
Bye.